Hello, hello, comrades and friends. Welcome to the 11th episode of Dust James Weekly Assault on U.S. Empire, Revolutionary, Anti Imperialist, Working Class Analysis. Last week, I covered a big topic. Um, I basically went back to Lenin's What is to be done. I briefly discussed the situation in the U.S. left, and I advocated more as many people as possible understanding and studying Marxism. Um, the idea, if you read Lenin's What is to be done, you'll see he makes a distinction between agitation and propaganda. And he said agitation goes to the masses. Agitation is where you get the people angry and get them active. But propaganda is reserved for cadre or more revolutionary members. It's a little more deep and it has a more scientific understanding. Um, and I was advocating that we should actually spread as many to the masses as much revolutionary understanding and understanding as possible in the day and age of the computer revolution, where people are more like people have access to as much information, like more information than ever before. We can go directly to the masses and spread scientific socialism. um a little bit about last week's topic. I didn't, off the top of my head, have as much information about social revolution, communist movements in the United States, the 30s and so on, and I missed a lot of my. And I'm actually going to read a little more. I started two books, Civil Rights Unionism, um, talking about the tobacco workers' struggle in Winston-Salem. Powerful work. One of the first integrated unions. I'm going to read a little bit on that. Maybe I'll discuss it here. Also, I ordered Caleb Maupin's "The Rise of the Rise and Fall of the U.S. Communist Party," which I'm going to check into. It's very brief. It'll be some good more talking points for me to go over. Um, as far as that, this week's topic: U.S. imperialist hegemony. Now, that seems, I know a lot of folks, um, those are big terms, but I'm going to break it down. A lot of people use the word imperialism wrong. That's the basis of my show, and anti-imperialism. And I've discussed what imperialism is. Imperialism isn't when somebody attacks somebody. Imperialism isn't a war. Imperialism is a global economic and political system. A system where a few monopolists, oligarchs, banking, particularly in the banking and oil sector, energy sector, along with military industrial complex and large scale manufacturers, own, consider, like basically control the domestic economy, and then use their power to control other countries for resources and markets. That's the system of imperialism. Now, hegemony is basically how that pyramid like structure functions. So essentially, you have the elite of the elite, the 1% of the 1% on top, 1% on 1% of the 1% on top. The bankers, the big five families, Rockefellers, Carnegies, etc. That's at the very top. And then as you go down, you got the large scale manufacturers, those associated with the military industrial complex, etc. You go down even more, you have smaller factory owners, you have small businesses, you have what they call the middle class that owns their home. And then you have, in the US, you have the working poor, and the elite of the elite and the ruling class in general use these different distinctions to pin us against each other. They always say, well, at least you're not the group below you, you know. And then beyond the US, you have your imperialist countries in Europe, etc., and then third world countries that, for the most part, are completely, their leadership is controlled. Like, they have monarchies, they have dictatorships, and those monarchies and dictatorships are controlled for the benefit of the U.S. imperialists, the people on top of the banks. Saudi Arabia, a monarchy that uses slave labor, is basically there and propped up by imperialism. Israel, an apartheid state, is there functioning for the benefit of the elites, the oligarchs in the United States. This is a system of U.S. imperialist hegemony. So that's basically the start of the topic. I wanted to actually get into some of my experiences, like bring it back to like where I'm coming from. Like, I think a Marxist analysis is an amazing, and everyone should do it. And everyone should do like what I'm trying to do here. Everyone should learn the scientific socialism, material conditions, and then go back and think about your life. Think about the people you met. Think about the struggles you've been through and apply it to it. So, a little bit about my story. I grew up in a big family. I had two sisters, three brothers, mom and dad. And for much of my childhood, we lived in a single wide trailer down a mile long dirt road in rural North Carolina. And my family's life was a little chaotic. Everyone wanted to get out of the house and go to their friends, where we could get better food and access to entertainment and other things. And a way in which I really did that, um, especially when I was in high school, I spent a lot of time in a community, in a largely Mexican migrant community. I'm largely an undocumented community. Um, and I learned a lot. Like, I learned basically like a lot from those people. Like, my understanding of self discipline and pride, and like working and like a lot of the stuff I missed at home. I actually learned um, in community and in the immigrant community of my friends, neighbors. I lived there for a while, and a lot of what I was advocating on my last live, and actually what AOC advocated with her live with Bernie Sanders, and what Caleb Maupin's advocating, and what some of the Black nationalists groups are doing, particularly the New African Black Panther Party, post videos of them going out in the community and offering help and offering food. I think Black Hammer was asking for donations of it. I saw some of their pictures of doing mutual aid, and I've seen different groups, even in the Chicano nationalist movement. I see people organizing for strikes. It's powerful, but a lot, and it's interesting. I think it has to do with U.S. imperialist hegemony. Why is it that the groups needing to be done are some of the most oppressed and exploited, particularly in the oppressed community, the oppressed nations in the United States, within Afro American, and within Aslan and the Mexican American community? It's that they've had worse conditions, worse material conditions in the belly of the beast. And so they were forced to survive, to adapt, to adapt things like mutual aid, like basically helping each other. Like there's a kind of this racist stereotype that, oh, I don't even want to say it. Like a lot of people who get in a car is associated with Mexican folks. And everyone does that. And that's kind of racist. But a lot of it has to do with poverty and exploitation. And that's kind of like a metaphor for mutual aid. Like I noticed, like while I was in this community I lived in, where majority of the people were from a small town in Guerrero, Mexico, and most of them worked in the chicken plant. Um, and I noticed they're already practicing mutual aid. They carpool to work. Um, Multiple people get on cell phone plans. There'll be larger gatherings. People will bring food together, and there's been a culture of mutual aid in oppressed communities for a long time. So when political groups, Black Panthers, Chicano Nationalists, etc., will actually do these aids, and I'd like to see it more often. I'm seeing more people do organizing for general strike. There's more time more than ever to organize with your neighbors and organize. Just no one pay rent in April. Like their ability, like it's similar to the exponential curve, like that's affecting the coronavirus. Like if we all meet together, it's going to spike, and then the medical facilities, who can only deal with this many people, if it spikes the exponential equation, all these people don't have the medical infrastructure, will die. Well, if you can also apply that same curve to a rent strike, and this is the state's ability to imprison people or evict people, right? And then if we all rent strike at once, they can't evict all of us. Now, the economy is going to make it where people aren't going to be able to pay rent. And if everyone just does that, it will stay below their ability to put us in prison or to kick us out of our homes. But if we're able to organize rent strikes, and a lot of communities are already, a lot of state governments and other things are actually implementing no eviction notices. So, I mean, if there was a time more than ever, a rent strike would be where to go. So, get a little bit more into this idea of U.S. imperialist hegemony, and it's kind of like a pyramid system, and you can see it in the U.S. Like workers who make $10, $12 an hour will look down on those who work for $7, $8, $9 an hour, especially in the South. Like I noticed, like the plants that I've worked in about every menial job there is in my community. I've worked in meat packing industry. I've worked in the production of cosmetics over at Coty, and I've worked in agriculture, and just the pay grade amounts, the way people are treated. It's like the people who make $10, $12 an hour and might have benefits look down on people who make 8 or 9, temporary workers, say, at least I'm not them. You know, at least I'm not them. I'm a little bitter. Those people deserve their position. Like we're taught to be very individualistic. We're taught what you have, you deserve, and you worked for it. And those other people who don't have what you have, they haven't worked hard enough, or they're not smart enough. And these are simply lies. There's like a pyramid system that's in place. Like I said, and it's not even a pyramid. It's like there's a point on top and it just drops down, and then we kind of come out like this. It's more shaped like a curve, like a black hole. Like the end of the black hole is us, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller as you get to the top. These people at the top own as much as like large majorities of points of the population, and they use issues like race, um, where you live in your neighborhood, documented status, education. Um, they fund certain schools, they don't fund others, uh, to maintain this system of hegemony. Like, this is what I mean uh, by hegemony. So I worked in factories where I made $10, $12 an hour, and North Carolina, that's decent for a working class person. I know, well, it's not decent, it's horrible, it's starvation wages. But if you can make 12, 13, 14, or even 15, you're doing something good. Because a lot of people, and there's like sweatshops around here, we work for $8, $9 an hour with limited or no benefits, through staffing agencies. And people in these positions tell themselves, oh, if I would have went to college, if I would have done this, I would have done that right, I wouldn't be in this position. But the system is set up to keep us in this position. So you got like people in the middle class looking at down people in the working class. And then bigger than that, we're taught as Americans, somehow we're in this together and we're better than all those other people in them other countries that this country uses and extorts their resources from. Well, maybe those are just shithole countries. Maybe those people, they eat certain things, like, or they're just bad to each other, or they're just somehow just more corrupt. They're more likely to be corrupt because they're in a poor country. And poverty and corruption do go hand in hand, but this mindset that made racism, great national chauvinism, are just ideological concepts and frameworks to justify the system, the global political economic system of imperialism. And they use just this hegemony to keep that. So I see a lot of white folks will be like I ain't trailer trash. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like man, I work hard. I got this $12 an hour job, 13 hour an hour job. I'm not like them people that live in a trailer. Maybe I own my house. I'm not trailer trash. And what they don't understand is, I mean, we're all one or two steps away from homelessness, like one or two um, events that we have no control over. We could easily become homeless. So you get like white folks in the South, maybe they own their car and they got a house, and they'll be like, I ain't like them other white folks. I ain't trailer trash, you know? And it's not the people living in like the mass majority of people. Maybe they had bad luck, maybe they had this or that. Um, the school they went to wasn't funded as well. People don't control who their parents are. So folks living in trailers and stuff, and poverty. So we're taught to look down on the people below us. If we somehow associate with the people below us, we're like them. We want to be like the person above us, you know? And those people above us are somehow more kinder or more intelligent. And this is simply not the case. This is hegemony. This is imperialist hegemony. Middle class black folks are taught, well, I ain't like them. They repeat racist media about their people in their own race. Like, I ain't like them thugs in the street or what have you. I don't even want to repeat that nonsense. Or you got folks in the immigrant community. Well, I'm documented and I got my document. I ain't like them on other undocumented people. Like, once you make it a little bit, you think you're different from the people, struggling more than you are. And that's how they got us programmed in our mindset. And the worst thing I hear is, well, we're all Americans, when we go overseas, and regardless of our class and regardless of our race, we march side by side, hand in hand, for freedom and democracy. That one, that position of great national chauvinism. People of color, white folk, like everyone is like this great national chauvinism. That's how somehow we come together and fight for freedom, when this is simply an outright lie. Our government, our military, they go out and they simply destroy entire countries. Anyone who is any opposition, they're like a cartel. They go out and destroy any and all competition to their global dominance. And we're simply pawns for that. So no, there's no pride in marching side by side with people of different races or different classes to go kill people worse than us. There's absolutely no pride. That's great national chauvinism, and it's part of U.S. imperialist hegemony. Shout out to Daryl Mitchell. Thanks for listening. Shout out to Gavin Lockard. I said I'd do a little bit more interacting with you folks. Gavin Lockard, once you make it a little bit, you think you're different from others struggling. Right on, right in the fields. Exactly. That's where I'm going with this U.S. hegemony. At least I ain't white trash. At least I ain't hood. At least I'm an American. This is how they use it. This is hegemony. Why do you think they need to keep a certain of the population unemployed? It's to say, at least you got a job. Why don't they have universal income? It's to drive us to work harder. Americans work harder than almost any, like if you compared to any other industrial nation of the world, Americans work harder and receive less. And that's because they use the club of the certain amount of the population that they keep unemployed against the people in the factories. So we don't able to fight for our rights. So we're not able to ask for more wages. We're not able to get benefits. They use the suffering of our neighbors and friends, the unemployed, as a club against us. And that's where the notion of solidarity comes in. An injury to one of us is an injury to all of us. If they can shoot black folks in the street and get away with it, they can shoot any of us. If they can make a certain population unemployed, they can use that to keep us working harder and to keep us from demanding our benefits. Even in Christianity, there's positive aspects of Christianity. You'll be judged as how you treat those least amongst you. And that's ties in with the communist socialist understanding of class solidarity. So, I mean, that's my introduction. I think I broke down imperialist hegemony in a more relaxed way that people can understand. I'm going to go into my current events section. For my how far? I got 23 minutes. I usually do about an hour. I got a brief current event section. So I'm going to go, my first topic is going to be Mexico and their president there, AMLO. I speak a little bit of Spanish, but it's not what it should be. I've been isolated as a truck driver. I'm going to try to pronounce the president's name, something that even I think it was one of the people in the Democratic debate couldn't pronounce, but Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. People call him AMLO. I saw a good article that was actually shared by folks in the Chicano nationalist community, talking about how he vows to bail out poor and not big corporations. That's such a contrast to what Mexico's had before. AMLO came into power through a new, almost like a third party movement, a broad coalition that united religious groups, socialist groups, poor groups. It united a broad coalition of folks in that country under the party of their National Regeneration Movement. And AMLO has already started using publicly controlled banks to give small loans to people. And you notice as political figures in the third world, as they become more anti-neoliberal, the U.S. media begins to attack them, and they have certain call words. I've already seen the U.S. media, MSNBC, CNN. Right now, they're really mad that they keep pointing out that AMLO is still going out and talking with people. He isn't so self-isolating. And they're attacking him, and they say, oh, he's cutting down on democracy somehow, when he's a popular democratic figure. And I think the movement and him are doing positive work, and I'm glad to see that he vows to bail out the poor and not big companies. I've talked with some Marxists that have some criticism of him, and I think that's positive, particularly in his treatment of migrants. And this is largely from pressure from Trump to stop migrants from Central America who are fleeing conditions that U.S. imperialism, the 2009 coup in Honduras, Reagan's dirty wars, and basic general imperialist exploitation conditions created. So AMLO has been pressured by Trump to stop the migration there, and that he hasn't been the best on that. But if you look at what he's doing, and that's another thing, like you see a lot of you see a lot of communist socialists, specifically Trotskyites, who only they have this specific set of socialism. If it isn't this, it isn't socialism, and that is not scientific. Socialism is when you evolve from the situation where profits govern. If you start forming systems like what's in China, what's in Vietnam, what's in Nicaragua, they have evolved past the rule of profits. And if you look at like what they did with the coronavirus, look at the success of Vietnam and the success of China in regards to the spread of the outbreak. Their primary goal they see is building their country. They need their workers. They need to maintain and that's they are first in the priority, and profits are put second. You know, there's problems with Vietnam and China, but it is a more socialist understanding, like a more scientific understanding, to not look what people name themselves, the labels they put on. Look at what they're physically doing. Look at the conditions. Look at how what they do results. And I think if you look at what AMLO is doing in Mexico, he's helping the people, and he's standing up against the imperialist hegemonic system in support of the Mexican people. Another interesting thing about Mexico right now is Mexico hasn't been as hard hit with the coronavirus, and they actually, believe it or not, they actually have a positive national healthcare system in Mexico, and doctors are a lot more accessible to people in Mexico, even compared to here. So I think they're, even as poor as Mexico is, they're more apt to deal with the coronavirus than the U.S. I mean, in the U.S., we have co-pays and people that were uninsured. It's a mess. It's a mess. The way they ration out healthcare in this country is to get people to have as little of it as possible, which is way more expensive when you take out preventative medicine. But in an interesting turn of events, there was actually protesters at the Mexican border trying to stop people from the United States going into Mexico and infecting them. China's brought up similar measures where they have successfully stopped the virus in China through quarantining whole cities, having enough tests, building hospitals in matters of days. And they've stopped traveling to China. See, Gavin Lockhart, it wasn't. Damn security message coming up on this computer. It's going to open Chrome. Okay, it didn't get rid of it. Okay, I got rid of it. It wasn't a pronunciation issue. Tom Steyer and Senator Amy Clover didn't know the president of Mexico is. Oh, wow. That's even worse. All right, so comrades, the president of Mexico is Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, also known as AMLO, and he is vowed, unlike Trump, who says, oh, we have to work with our business partners, which is code for let's just give bailouts to corporations and the banks, and then we're an afterthought. The president of Mexico vows to bail out the poor and not big companies. I'll go into my next current event. I think so. Because of the coronavirus, there hasn't been as many political debates. There hasn't been any political rallies. Instead, people are going, like me, are going on to the internet, social media, and they're having live discussions. Bernie Sanders was one of them. I watched, believe it was Monday, where Bernie Sanders actually addressed the country with the squad. AOC, Ilhan Omar, others. And I watched it, and I think there's a lot of hope and positive, even though Bernie Sanders voted for imperialist war for decades, calls Maduro a tyrant wrongly. In that show, I actually saw AOC calling for mutual aid. And I agree with the call for mutual aid. We should go out with our neighbors. Like, people are suffering right now. 1/5 of the U.S. population is either underemployed, laid off, and now is like, if there was a time more than any other, rent strikes, positive, but mutual aid, just going out and feeding people in the community. Maybe find old elders in your community are unable to leave the house. Maybe you can go out and bring food for them. Maybe they can't afford Uber Eats or DoorDash. Like, reach out to the old people in your life and see how they're doing. Talk to people in your social network, see where they're doing. Reach out to your neighbors. Make sure people are fed. This is a crisis, and mutual aid is a powerful force. And when we do it as workers, we don't depend on the capitalist government to maintain us. We're able to build networks that can help bring about socialist revolutionary organizations. And I've seen this done in the Black nationalist movements, particularly, I'll mention their name again, the New African Panther Party, and I think the United Panthers. I saw people near Indianapolis doing mutual aid, going door to door. Hit me up if you see a story like that. I want to know about it. That's truly inspiring. What I talk about doing, there's people doing, particularly in the oppressed communities. And AOC actually called for that. I thought it was very positive. But take that in contrast of Bernie Sanders' message of calling for more, a bigger aid package, universal health care. I think these are positive social programs. I think they are part of the great national chauvinism that I talked about earlier. That's why AOC and Bernie Sanders call Maduro, who is a popular elected leader, and arguably Venezuela is more democratic than the United States. Like, our Constitution was written by Thomas Jefferson, as revolutionary as he was at the time, raped his slaves and then enslaved his own children. I mean, that's who the Constitution are here. And Venezuela, they recently rewrote their Constitution, and masses of poor black and brown folks, poor people, indigenous people, were part of writing and approving the Constitution in Venezuela. So compare that with Joe Biden, who's mentally incompetent, racist, has a history of racism. Why people are backing him is insane. I think it comes down to people are largely ignorant about politics. They don't want to get involved in politics. They don't really try to understand these things. I think it's changing, though. There's a lot of hope out there. But compare that with even worse, you get to Trump. Trump said, against all medical knowledge of what's going on in this country, we haven't got anywhere near the peak. We're just getting to the peak. Like, people are going to die because they didn't test enough people, because they put profits of the pharmaceutical industry over getting the tests that the World Health Organization was advocating. So they said, no, we don't want those cheap, easy to get, accurate tests. We need to make sure American companies profit. So this will result in the death of thousands of people. And we haven't even gotten to that point. And Trump is saying, oh, this will all blow over by Easter. I want to see packed churches. Like, the dude is insane. He's anti-scientific. It's an embarrassment. How the U.S. empire decided to use that guy as their token leader is is crazy. Now, I'm not advocating that we should get someone who can talk better and be a better representation of imperialism, like Obama was, who carried out horrible war crimes all over the world, including the destruction of Libya and the coup in Honduras. I'm not advocating that, but I mean, this is ridiculous. And people are believing this, and I see people on social media. It's like, oh, it's a scam. The world socialists. It's a socialist conspiracy. I think a lot of it's puppeted from InfoWars and conspiratorial, anti-scientific spots, but the president is basically foaming that out, and you have white supremacists are more emboldened, anti-scientific opinions and understanding is more emboldening, and going out in public and faster spreading this disease is killing people. So, I mean, be safe out there, stay in as much as you can. Try practice they call it social distancing, which is a weird term. It's more like physical distancing. Like, you need to stay 6 feet away from that person. They might have disease. You might have disease. The less amount of people to get the disease, the less people are going to die from this disease. Not disease, it's a virus. My correction. So, as soon as the stock market crashed, they immediately gave them $1.5 trillion, and they've since said they're going to give them $1 trillion a day for weeks. They've already given them several children. We won't know how many trillions of dollars, if ever. Maybe we'll have a range of number of the trillions of dollars they've given to the banks in Wall Street to bail them out. That was their first response. This country is capitalist, maintained by capitalist hegemony, and us, the workers, are an afterthought. Their sole purpose, they're not incompetent. This government is not incompetent. Like, their goal isn't to save American lives. Their goal isn't the health and safety of the American people. The goal of the American government, both parties, Trump and the Democrats, they might differ slightly on how to do that, but their main goal is to maintain the profit for the imperialist, for the monopoly capitalist. So this is why they made sure that the pharmaceutical industry was getting money off of those tests. They bailed out the banks. They bailed out the stock market. And now in the bill with which they're trying to do a one-time measure of universal basic aid, maybe $1,500 or what have you, a band-aid on the unemployment crisis that's going on. They're trying to attach corporate slush funds and money for corporations and industry that are barely even hit. I heard they're trying to give money to the candy industry. Written in that bills, their lobbyists, their politicians are writing in bailouts for their chosen sector of the manufacturing and the ruling class. If you look at the Wall Street Journal, all right, so they bailed out the banks. The banks are going to do fine. You say Dow soars 11%, best day in 87 years. So, I mean, the stock market is going to come back. You know, they bail it out. They buy their own stocks again. They don't actually improve. They don't actually hire people. Like, that's basically what Trump has been doing. Trump gave them tax cuts. They bought their own stock. It artificially went up, and they said the coronavirus was going to correct that, and it went down. We're probably facing the next recession. This is simply what happens in capitalism. Every 7 to 10 years, there's a collapse because of the crisis of overproduction. The workers cannot buy back what we produce because the capitalists need a profit. Wall Street is going to be fine. The government, we have a government of action. We have a government of action fighting for Wall Street and corporations. I took that's a variant of the slogan that Caleb Maupin uses. We need a government of action to fight for working families, which I agree with. But what we have currently is a government of action that fights for Wall Street and the corporations through wars and immediate bailouts within days of a stock market crash. Wall Street is going to do fine. They have powerful people working to maintain their profits. Who is not going to be fine is us. We are dying in the hundreds. We are not being tested. We have to take care of ourselves. We need mutual aid programs. We need rent strikes. So look in that in contrast to this title from the Wall Street Journal. U.S. virus cases, jobless rate soars. Jobless rate soars. So what the government could be doing, if we control the government, we could be employing people directly to build the lack of face masks and protective equipment needed. We could be building hospitals. We could directly build what is needed and bail out the workers directly. That would be a government of action to fight for working families. That's not what we have. We have a government of action that fights for Wall Street, and we are just an afterthought. So I'll get into that. So I listened to Democracy Now, and it's liberal bourgeois media. They're not. They also have some elements of great national chauvinism. And they somewhat parrot some of the attacks on anti-imperialist countries. But a lot of domestic issues they're pretty good on. And what they did was they interviewed doctors on the front lines of the epicenter in New York City. And doctors and nurses and healthcare workers who are on the front lines saving people's lives, risking their own lives to save others, do not have the needed medical supplies. I think it's N95 masks are the only ones proven to stop. So it's the actual spread of the virus. So they need these to go in and be patients with the general public that may be infected and those they know who are infected with the virus. And they don't have these. They don't even have basic protective equipment. So they're going in. My recommendation is, if you're not absolutely gonna die from something, you might want to avoid, like, this is you might want to avoid going and seeking out medical help, because you might be infected, because not even the nurses, have the correct equipment. um I mean, it's shameful, and this hasn't even peaked yet. I heard about deaths in the Delta region, Mississippi, etc. The Delta region in the United States, within the African American community in the Delta region, like, I think 50% of adults are illiterate in these regions, and they don't have nearly amount of medical infrastructure that they have in New York City and other places, and it's spreading there, and people are dying. Um, and we could have easily solved it or helped it, but this government doesn't care about us. This government's sole purpose is profits. We're simply propagated to become appendages to the machines and keep it going, and keeping their empire going. With automation, less and less of us are needed. And then you have figures in the left, the so-called left environmentalist movement, calling human beings a cancer, calling human beings a virus. It's dangerous, dark stuff. Okay, so there was recently more attacks on Maduro. So I briefly touched on Maduro, successor to Evo Morales, in the late 90s, through largely petro-socialism. They have arts programs. They've built, I believe it was 1 million houses. I think there was a big celebration about 1 million houses being built for poor people, compared to the capitalist oppressed countries around them. Venezuela, even with the slash in oil prices, is doing much better than their capitalist neighbors. And the U.S. empire attempted a coup and tried to install Guaido to power, and no one even knew who that was. And just recently, um, the U.S. government, Trump administration, has called Maduro a narco terrorist that is trying to flood America with cocaine. This is straight out of the playbook of the Reagan era dirty wars. And it's been proven that the Reagan administration was actually responsible for bringing cocaine in the United States to fund anti-communist forces like the Contras, etc. I mean, this accusation is absolutely insane. The Colombian government, which is backed by the U.S., actually backs paramilitary groups to fight the FARC, who also have known dealings with cocaine. And Guaido, the person who they tried to install to replace Maduro, has known ties with people with cocaine traffickers. I mean, it's absolutely insane. It's just another smear attempt against the popular leader and the socialist gains in Venezuela. The U.S., in a time when the world should be working with each other, and a time where we need to come together as a global community to save lives, the U.S. has continued sanctions against the people of Venezuela, and continued sanctions against the people of Iran. People in Iran are dying because the U.S. is a big bully. It's trying to control the markets to stop them from getting the needed medical attention that they need. The U.S. government is a murderous regime. The greatest purveyor, as Martin Luther King said, the greatest purveyor of violence on earth is my own government. So that's about all the current events. I think I'll go into my conclusion. So I talked about hegemony. We're taught, maybe Americans, middle class Americans, white Americans, we're taught everything we had, we worked for, the house we had, which is true. But people in the black community, people in Chicano community, Mexican American, Latino community, have been systemically kept down, kept out, and they can't even have it. It's not through their own education. It's not through faults within them or the working class in general, people they call trailer trash. Capitalist is keeping people down in general. And we're taught that we have these homes because we're this or that. We're slightly better than the people slightly lower than us. And we as Americans are better than the shithole countries of the world. This ideology that that you're somehow better than the people lower than you is absolute trash and is being used to kill us, is being used to destroy the world. We need to adopt class solidarity. We need to adopt the idea an injury to one is an injury to all of us. And it's so wrong. It's like they're holding back, like the money that the monopoly capitalists are actually hurting the people, the middle class people. They're hurting anyone that's basically lower than like 99. They call Wall Street called it 99%. We are the 99%. It's bigger than 9%. 99.9% of the American population is being exploited and oppressed by these few oil and banking cartel and large manufacturers. The money that could be going into building medical infrastructure, that could be going into technology, is being stolen by them and just used to isolate, and is just used to consolidate their power. I mean, there's so much room for unity. It's so messed up. If the 99.9% of us just said, we need to destroy these people, we're not going along with the, oh, at least I'm not that ideology, adopt class solidarity, we can change this country for the better. So I was going to read this earlier, but I think I'm going to read it now. A bit of Marxist literature that's pretty easy to understand, Wage, Labor, and Capital. Let me find my spot. Okay, here's a good section. By what are wages determined? The manufacturer who calculates his cost of production, and in accordance with it, the price of the product, takes into account the wear and tear of the instruments of labor. If a machine cost him, for example, 1,000 shillings, and this machine is used up in 10 years, he adds 100 shillings annually to the price of the commodities in order to be able, after 10 years, to replace the worn out machine with a new one. In the same manner that the cost of production of simple labor power must include the cost of propagation, by means of which the race of workers is enabled to multiply itself and to replace worn out workers with new ones. The wear and tear of workers, therefore, is calculated in the same manner as the wear and tear of machines. Thus, the cost of production of simple labor power amounts to the cost of the existence and propagation of the worker. The price of this cost of existence and propagation constitute wages. The wages thus determined are called the minimum of wages. This minimum wage, like the determination of the price of the commodity, in general by the cost of the production, does not hold good for the single individual, but only for the race. Individual workers, indeed, millions of workers, do not receive enough to be able to exist and to propagate themselves. But the wages of the whole working class adjust themselves within the limits of their fluctuations to the minimum. Essentially, what this is saying is the system of capitalism, which is the system we live under. It's the current US regime, and it's the current regimes that they support and prop up all over the world. Their interests as are aligned with the capitalists, and the capitalist interests is simply to maintain profits. They pay us just enough where we can survive, get ready for work, go back to work, and maybe raise one or two children to replace us after we die. And then something that happened after Marx, imperialist hegemony, they started to stratify the workers, where workers in third world countries, just enough that's needed for production, are allowed to survive, and the rest can be killed off to them. They don't care. And then it gets a little bit better as you go up the chain. It's slightly better in the United States compared to third world countries and the corrupt governments they support. But it comes back to the notion, even in the United States, this is why thousands of people, to the capitalist class, they don't mind if thousands of us die, long as the profits continue. This is why they chose a test that could help. They, instead of one that would save lives, understand the issue, be able to prevent the issue, track the virus, they chose to put profits over us. So they don't mind if a few thousand of us die, as long as their profits continue. They don't mind if we die in wars to support them, as long as their profits continue. They don't mind if the mass poverty in this world, the majority of the world lives on less than $2 a day. They don't mind of the horrible conditions, as long as their profits are maintained, and they maintain their system, imperialist system, through hegemony. They don't care about us as the individual. As long as we're maintained as a race of workers that will produce children and do what is necessary to build them. And the day and age of automation, we're becoming less and less necessary. If we have any hope of survival, we need to destroy the power of the monopoly capitalists. We need to build broad front coalitions like they have done in Mexico to defeat U.S. imperialism, to take out both of their right-wing, left-wing, Democrat, Republican bird that is keeping us poor and destroying our lives here and the people around the world. All right, that's going to do it for today. Join me next week, Saturday mornings. Make this a thing. Go back and listen to my earlier episodes. If you have a commute, I have 11 episodes made. Listen to the episodes, reply. If you like the content, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, get notifications of when I'm going to be out talking with folks. All right, have a good rest of your day. All power to the people.